I was a software development engineer at an online learning company, working on the service that delivered live-class video links and attendance events. We were preparing for a national school program that would increase concurrent sessions about fivefold for 3 weeks. My engineering manager proposed duplicating the entire service stack in a dedicated environment for the program. He believed isolation was the safest way to protect our normal customers, and the commercial team liked having a visibly separate platform for an important contract. I strongly disagreed. Our previous incidents mostly came from configuration drift and deployment differences, so creating another stack 4 weeks before launch seemed likely to add the exact risk we were trying to remove. This mattered because the program represented about £2.5 million in annual revenue, but our existing customers still accounted for most usage. My objective was to demonstrate whether the shared platform could meet the load with controlled isolation, and to make sure the final decision was based on measured failure modes rather than the apparent comfort of separation. I first wrote down my manager's strongest case, not just my objections. A dedicated stack limited capacity contention, gave the program an independent rollback, and simplified contractual reporting. Then I listed the risks: duplicate deployment pipelines, untested failover, 2 sets of operational alarms, and only 3 engineers available to support both. I gathered data from the last 6 incidents and found 4 involved inconsistent configuration between environments. None resulted from tenant traffic exhausting shared compute. I presented that evidence privately to my manager and recommended one shared stack with per tenant rate limits, reserved worker capacity, and separate service level reporting. He pushed back that historical incidents didn't prove the platform could handle a 5-fold peak. That was fair. I proposed a decision test: reproduce forecast traffic at 130%, inject a noisy tenant and a worker failure, and compare recovery against a minimal duplicate environment. We ran the test over 3 days. The shared design maintained link delivery below 400 milliseconds and protected normal tenants through reserved queues. The duplicate stack isolated load but took 28 minutes to recover after a failed deployment because its pipeline and alarms had not been exercised. I believed that settled the question, and I said so quite directly in the review. My manager still chose the dedicated environment. His reason wasn't raw performance. Legal had raised a late requirement to demonstrate data separation for attendance records, and he judged that changing the contract language was riskier than operating the extra stack. I disagreed with treating infrastructure as the primary control, but the decision was his and the new legal constraint was real. Once the call was made, I committed fully. I took ownership of reducing drift rather than continuing to relitigate the architecture. I converted configuration to one version template with environment parameters, made both stacks use the same deployment artifact, mirrored alarms, and added a daily comparison that failed if security or runtime settings diverged. I also reused the shared platform load tests against the dedicated stack and ran 2 rollback drills with the support team. 1 week before launch, the comparison caught a missing connection timeout in the dedicated environment. Fixing it prevented a resource leak during the final rehearsal. The program then launched without a customer-visible incident, handled a peak of 18,000 concurrent sessions, and met its attendance reporting commitments. Normal customer latency remained unchanged. Operating the second stack consumed about 14 engineer days over the 3-week program, higher than my shared proposal, but we retired it on schedule and reused the configuration comparison in our disaster recovery environment. Looking back, I was right about drift risk, but I focused too narrowly on engineering evidence and learned about the legal constraint too late. I would ask at the start which business assumptions could override a technical test and bring legal into the decision framing before advocating a solution. I would still challenge the duplicate stack, but I would present 2 compliant options rather than arguing as though performance evidence alone settled the decision. The important part was that, after disagreeing, I protected the chosen path with the same energy I would have given my own proposal.